afternoon, everyone. Thank you for continuing to watch these conversations with. Constantly, we're learning new ways to navigate this very, very unknown world. This afternoon, we're going to be joined by Vince Molinaro, who we'll get into his story in a second. But for those of you watching at home, obviously watching at home, there's not many other places for you to be watching this from. If you want to contribute to the conversation, use the comment bar. And if you have questions that come up throughout the conversation, we'll find a way to weave them in. But I obviously don't want to waste any more time talking. So Vince, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So would love for you to kick it off. Maybe just a little bit of background on your story, obviously, so we can frame this. I know what your story is, but for our audience. And then secondly, just how are you doing? How's your mindset doing? How are you navigating this just like the rest of us?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm Vince Molinaro, and I work with leaders kind of at moments in their careers where it matters most. And normally the work we do is B2B, and we help companies get clear on the kind of leadership they need for the future tied to their strategy and help build that and support the leaders through that. So I've been in the leadership space for most of my career, and it all triggered very early in my career. My very first job, when I saw a mentor of mine in a large public sector organization die from lung cancer. Before she passed away, I went to visit her, and she revealed a toxic culture that she was part of in that organization, and she believed that the stress that she endured was what caused her disease to come on. And that moment was just a pivotal watershed moment for me personally, early in my early 20s, to really think about what was I going to do with my life. And I left that organization on a mission to work with great leaders, because she was one of the best leaders I ever worked with. I saw the impact she had on me, the impact she had on others. But in that organization, her approach to leadership wasn't valued. And so that's kind of what I've been doing, my whole career. And I've been at it, my consulting, my own leadership roles, my research and my writing. And that's kind of the work I'm doing. So here we are in a COVID global pandemic world. And what it means to be a leader is being redefined on a daily basis. And so when you're a leadership geek, me, studies leadership, works with leaders, understanding and seeing the stories play out now in real time, who's really stepping up and who are the that we're admiring in this unprecedented time, and who are the leaders and the companies disappointing us. There are so many stories playing out. So at a personal level, I'm fortunate to be in a position where we've got to do in my own company, my own business. My team is virtual. We've always worked virtually, so we're not learning about how to use Zoom and all of that. So we're not going through what some other people are doing. But what I'm also doing is remaining really connected to my clients, to other senior leaders in my network, to just kind of get a sense of where are they. So I think for me, it really comes down to the best way to manage in this environment, at least for me and my team, is to serve and to be there for folks and not worry about invoices, and just help them at a moment where they need to step up in ways maybe they have never had to before. And not that I have all the answers, but through it, we'll figure it out. So I'll pause there and go to the next questions and see if there's anything there that piques your curiosity.
I think, Vince, there's a lot there. Just at a base level, right? Now, if we take leadership level, say a franchise system, franchisor, or even a business, right? Any business right now that's facing an existential threat, right? You have the economic pressures that we're all experiencing with COVID. You also have a redefining marketplace with patterns that are going to exist for many years into the future, or many months, we don't know. So in times like now, right, threat to business, shifting markets, really things that we're all dealing with we've never dealt before. what are the qualities, or what does it mean to be a good leader right now?
Yeah, I had a chat with one of my clients. So this morning, CEO, founder of a company, and what he's really realizing is, I don't think there's anything that's necessarily different than what we've always talked about. What we need leaders and franchise leaders to do well. I think what becomes clearer is there are certain things that bring greater focus right now. He talked about the need to be adaptable and be mentally flexible to really not only manage with the multitude of things coming at us, but also to start, when the timing is right, to start envisioning what will it look like on the other end of this? What will the future look like? What are the opportunities that we've never considered before? And I know for a lot of people right now that they're not even in that headspace, but at some point, that's the difference with leadership. Leaders have to kind of manage it while paving the way for the future. So that becomes, critically important. The second one that I always talk about, is, we're hearing a lot about the word resilience, but to me, resilience is not enough. Resilience to me is like being, that Bozo the Clown punching bag, just keep coming up after being hit over and over again. But really, it's finding something in yourself, a real sense of resolve to kind of see the way through. And I think that that's really critical, that we take the time out ourselves to think, where am I going to find this resolve? How am I going to inspire myself? Because we're just being pulled in so many directions. And I chat with another leader just a little while ago this afternoon. Call. She's in Silicon Valley, and had a great notion of, do you have a sense that you were born to lead in this moment? Like, I love that idea, right? To say, is this the real opportunity for you to kind of lead in a way that maybe you've never led with before? And so I think that adaptability, that resolve, and ultimately that creativity to look at the world a little differently becomes important. I'm curious, as I'm seeing a lot of people talk about, there's a sense of, when will things be normal? And part of me feels like, well, if all we do is go through this, if we have all of this, demand on healthcare workers, the lives that have been affected, the people who have lost their lives, and if all we do is go back to normal, somehow I think that's a missed opportunity. We can change the world. And business leaders are in a prime position, and entrepreneurs are in a prime position to do that. We may not be ready to have that thought right now because we're still kind of dealing with everything, but that's kind of the three things that I'm thinking about.
So it's such a powerful insight, because, look, there's a theme of the survival of the fittest, and the reality is there are some leaders right now that are like, look, here's what I'm going to navigate. I have my current business. I'm going to free up cash flow for opportunity. So there are businesses, including ours, that have gone through the concept of a layoff during this time. That doesn't mean we're stopping hiring. We will not use freeze, because on opportunity, the talent pool just went from very, very thin and locked up to wide open. So looking at the talent pool, we're like, all right, at some point we're going to return, and we got to go like this. So if this was normal before, we got to go like this.
Yeah,
there's going to be only a small percentage that own that, and the rest are going to fall to the bottom, which that probably prolongs economic recessions, because the depression is going to be happening. But that doesn't mean there isn't opportunity on this either.
I agree, and it's hard to talk about that for some, in light of the continued news around the number of cases, the number of people affected, people losing their lives. But the reality is, parallel, right? Like, while that's happening at a personal level, we're going to have businesses go through similar fates. And I think we've got to, that's ultimately what leadership is, right? Leadership is not just leading which is critical right now, but it's also kind of finding the time to think, how do we position ourselves, to come out of this maybe stronger than we were before this hit us, 4 to 6 weeks ago. And there's no easy answers for that, but certainly it's it's the entrepreneurs and business leaders who have the courage to think about those things that I think will come out stronger. And my sense is I'm really hoping that when we decide to kind of re-enter the world, that we'll be able to we'll all be ready to come at this strong to get the economy back to where it was or even stronger. I'm hoping that that's what comes.
And so, I find it interesting, right? Because you say about having the courage to think, right, about coming back stronger. And it really does. I mean, I never thought of it that way. Like, why would it take courage to think about innovation coming back stronger? But it really does take confidence and some courage to have confidence in what's ahead and to see the opportunity and to pause in this chaos and say, now's the time to be strategic and do that thinking. So, I mean, it sounds like something overlooked, but I never thought of it that way about having courage to do that.
Well, I think the courage comes from, our own reaction to what's happening, because, we're all overwhelmed. There's lots coming at us. We're managing multiple challenges, whether we're at home or in our apartments, we've got family, young kids, so we're all over. And so the leadership challenge, how do you manage that? But how do you rise above that so you can kind of think about coming and what next? And that, I think, is courage comes. You can kind of get yourself caught up in what's happening. You can find a way to rise above. There's a great quote I read, it just escapes me who wrote it. The line was that in a crisis, come the crisis. Don't get overwhelmed by the emotion of happening, that you now become part of the problem as opposed to thinking through what's forward. And that is a challenge. And I frame it as courage. It's not easy. There are legitimate challenges that we're all facing that impact us emotionally for sure. But those who are able to kind of put those back, not diminish them, but put those in check, but then find a way to elevate their leadership and vision the future, I believe are the ones who are going to get here faster and reap opportunities may exist as we get through this.
I find it fascinating that, just the concept of what makes us understand the shortness of life. Interesting is you talk about someone who's on their deathbed, talk about toxic culture they felt caused them stress, which in turn caused them to lose their life. And you think about this, because in this scenario, like the coronavirus doesn't care what you look like or what your pre-existing conditions are. It is on full-blown attack. It is out there swinging the sword wherever it finds it. And so it's changing, I think, people's perspectives on what does life mean and how much should I tolerate? So I would love your insight, just to unpack that a little bit more, because the reality is there are leaders that are super stressed right now, which stress is going to hurt immune system. And if the weakened immune system gets a hold of this virus, then your chances of success diminish. Doesn't mean they're gone, but
yeah.
Talk about that. Like, how do you even navigate that? Because it's like everything's so complex.
And that's the real hard part of leadership, right? Is the personal aspects of it. I was 27 when I left that large public sector organization. I started my first, my first business, and because I realized through that early experience, I was far more of an entrepreneur than I realized. And in the early days, people would ask, well, how's business? And I said, well, the business is great if I wasn't running it, because you're confronted every day, and all of those business leaders and entrepreneurs can probably relate to it, right? Your business ends of you, and more than probably you're capable of mastering at any moment in time. And so every day I feel like it's my own weaknesses, my own gaps that I'm struggling with the most. I bring strengths clearly to my business, but those are the things. And I think now everything's intensified. So I think what we also realize, and you raise a great point there, is that some of the practices. So if we didn't have regular routines that were in what I call a pre-COVID era, where we took care of ourselves, where we exercised, where we paid attention to our nutrition. If we weren't good at those things then, we have an opportunity now to turn that around, because all of that's going to become even more critical, as you say. So I think some of those things, are opportunities for us. And I think you see now more people paying attention to their food, more people cooking meals at home, more people baking bread, more people out riding bikes when they can. And because it's a way to cope, but it's a way to build your reserve power to deal with what's coming at us.
Vince, it was interesting. We were speaking with Annie Duke, and she brought up a great point, and it echoes something you said, which part of her analysis was that this crisis, this pandemic, is sort of lifted up the curtain and exposed for us the vulnerabilities that are there all the time, just that we don't see as business leaders and as humans. And earlier you were talking about that if we go back to normal after this, we're missing a big opportunity. So how do you put that all together from a leadership level, and what do you see as a new direction or modified direction in the future for leaders, businesses? Like, how do we take this moment where everything pretty much that we assumed we've now learned is on a faulty foundation in many ways? And I think it's very smart, your statement. I think our job's never to go back to normal after this, right? So how do we put that all together to, as best we can, win on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge I think that we're facing is it's hard to at times derive the kind of meaning and insight that's required to have that perspective while you're in the throes of something, right? It's only by looking back at something you can kind of go, those were the right. But I think that's partly what we have to do. So from a business standpoint, I think what's starting to happen now is people are realizing, if your company or your business is one where, doing work virtually and remotely was not something that was a primary focus, and you've been able to kind of do that and still be able to move ahead, well, there's an opportunity. How do we do that? It's better for employees. We maybe manage costs better. We may drive higher productivity. May not be 100% of the time, but part of the time. So that's kind of the low-hanging fruit that I think a lot of companies are going to realize where that makes sense for them. We're going to run into things like, the big question of, it was quite dramatic when I saw that story. I didn't have a chance to dig in to see if it's really true, but they kind of showed the canals of Venice and how the water has absolutely, cleared up. And so is there something that we're having to pay attention to about how do we deal with issues, of climate change, or maybe this quarantine has to be something we do on a periodic basis for time, just to give, the world a bit of a break from our frenetic pace that we were prior to all this hitting us. Are there ways in which we're learning on how to build greater customer loyalty, how to serve customers in different ways that until our backs are against the wall like they are now, we never thought about it before? So like the comment you had made, I think particularly when a company is growing and succeeding, growth hides a lot of where things are maybe not as strong as they need to be. So now we're understanding what that might look like. So I think where are those moments where we can kind of see the lessons, where we're almost hit with, wow, geez, I didn't think that was going to happen. Maybe there's something there for us to pursue. And leadership has always been a function of context, right? And those who are able to understand the world in which they're leading, kind of anticipate what might be coming or the implications of it, and are able to figure out a strategy to win in that environment, are always the ones that really reap the greatest rewards, in the long term. So it's a great point. I don't think I've got the answer, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about it at this moment in time.
Yeah, it's almost like the world has gotten blockbustered. Like we are stuck in our ways, and no matter what we're told that this is what's coming, we're like, nope, we're going to be a video store that's brick and mortar. Nothing's changing. So, I mean, it's fascinating because I think it's like, look, we're still dealing with life and death right now, and that's probably the most complex part of this. Is even though there's millions of lessons to be learned, our lives are at risk, and that's seen every single day on the front lines, on people who are healthy one day and sick the next. But if you think about some of the stuff that we can learn from this, such as maybe there's a pause, there's a reason why sports has off seasons to recuperate and to rehabilitate and to replan and reshape. That maybe there's some fundamentals that we just overlooked because we've moved through life so fast. And then the reality is we can't take the money with us when we die, but we work so hard for it. So how do you find like the intersection of peace, happiness, and leadership, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the opportunity we all have personally. And I think we've got to find a way to spend a bit of time thinking about that. I think a lot of people are, right? We, you know, in many ways being to reevaluate all of these things. I think the question will be exactly that, right? As we come through this, which we will we just go back and in, 6 months from now or a year from now, we're living just as harried, frenetic lives as we have ever had, or will we find a new way forward? And I think that the opportunity for us to kind of figure it out. But that kind of, I don't know if it's soul searching, but that kind of reflection about what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be a parent? What does it mean to be a friend, a brother, a sister, a son or daughter, a father, a mother, whatever, a leader? I think we're all asking ourselves those big questions. And you're right. At the moment in time, I mean, safety is what trumps, right? Everything. And at this moment in time, right? We all have, it's always this in the leadership lingo. There's this kind of idea around big L leadership that tends to be, the leadership demonstrated by CEOs and leaders of countries, and then small L leadership, the leadership that happens in companies and day to day by regular employees. And in many ways, what to get us through this is, hand washing, maintain our physical distance. It's a lot of small little things that'll get us through it, but they're critical as well. And sometimes companies succeed because you got a lot of great committed employees doing a lot of those little things. And I think now we still got to continue to do those little things that are critical right now for safety, for our health, and for supporting those who have been afflicted with.
Vince, the sort of off track, but like when I'm thinking about not going backwards and we're talking about leadership and right now, our clients, we're evaluating PPP loans, and one politician wants to add preferences for women-owned businesses. I mean, and just adding complexity, whereas a business is a business, and can we get past this? Is there a point in the corporate suites, in the leadership level in the future, and you may disagree with me, where we could maybe get past this supercharged dichotomy or bifurcation between male, female, race? Like, I feel like leadership and management has been infected by politics from the external world. And I'm just curious, is this an opportunity to get away from that? Or maybe we shouldn't? I was just curious what you thought about that. Well, basically, Vince, I'm tired of politicians. I'm tired of hearing, we have to hire this many people, or we're going to fund X dollars if we have a diversity czar, because I love my American brothers and sisters. I don't care the color they are. I think the politicians do, but I sort of get upset when now on the second round of funding, we're going to decide, well, maybe if you're a female-owned business or a minority-owned business, you're going to get priority, aside from the fact that we're not supposed to have genders. And then we're going to talk about diversity czars in corporate suites. And how about we just have the best people? Like, how do we get past all that nonsense?
I like you. I'm not highly political or have an interest in that. I think we've got to, I think that's the stuff that needs to be called out at this moment in time, because, what we know from all the diversity research is diversity is critical. It works. The data, and I'm talking big diversity, gender, but there's cultural diversity, and I think that's got to, we got to call it. And I think business leaders, I believe business leaders have an opportunity to kind of lead the way here, and I think call out some of that stuff, because it doesn't help us. In fact, at this moment in time, it kind of shows that those things that we used to get concerned about are not as, because at the end of the day, a business is a business, and we need to support as many of those to be successful, because that's what's going to help us be, it's going to get us through this. I think call that out and spotlight on it. That at the end of the day, it's not us keeping it's remaining us. It kind of keeps us stuck and becomes a massive distraction. In a world where we're already distracted and we're all trying our best to find a way forward. So, that's as best as I could answer that one. But that's frustrating.
That's a great response, though.
Yeah, that's just frustrating, because that's just, it doesn't help, right? And I think that's it, right? Does it move us quick, move us forward, right? It's like what we heard from all the public health experts is, you don't strive for action, you strive for how do you do things incrementally every day. And if you're getting stuck over certain things, it's not helpful, right? And we got to move on a number of fronts.
Well, you think about the things that hit all humans, no matter what your race or gender is, and you have to eat, and you have to drink, and you have to breathe, and you see the sun, and you see the clouds, and you see water. Like that's been it. And even SARS, when you think of a spread, it didn't affect the world. But this thing has gone around the world multiple times. That, if that, I still think that there's a lesson that will be learned on the other side of this. And it's not going to be a new normal, because new normal is not a real term. It's that right now is this normal, like that is going to be that tomorrow. But the reality is, if this allows us to push pause for a second, that's a win. If it allows us to say, let's reevaluate people as people, that could be a win. Do I think that's going to be the case? Probably not. I don't know that we're mature enough as human beings for that yet, but there could be some blessing in the fact that this helps train the mind from a leadership standpoint, from a work ethic standpoint. One thing Charles and I have discussed with other folks is I also feel like the headline 20 years from now, I think this is going to be one of the most important headlines that comes out of this, is that this woke the millennial up and showed them a bad day, which in turn is going to make them the greatest leaders that this country has ever seen. Because there hasn't been a bad day. There's been so many unicorn moments for that age group that now they understand, this is real. So there's going to be great birth that comes out of this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, one of the things I learned, in the global financial crisis was, and we don't often think about, economic cycles and the impact it has on people. So back then, we had a number of clients who realized as the financial crisis hit, it's like, oh my goodness, most of our senior leaders have only known good times and have never had to deal with this kind of adversity. And I think we're here again now, right? Because, the economy has been going great guns. And if, early 30s back then, and, early 30s, mid 30s, even into your approaching 40s, and moved into a senior executive role, all you have known is growth and strong economic time. And now you're dealing with something you may have never dealt with before. Now, none of us have, as you said earlier, with this particular moment, but just the notion of dealing with adversity of this magnitude and scale. And so that's why I think it's so important for all of us to kind of pause and reflect a little bit about your leadership role. What does it mean for you to be a leader? Last week I released an ebook called Upended to really just kind of help people think about their leadership role at this time. Because leadership success is not guaranteed in crisis. We've seen example leaders kind of, fail spectacularly and let their people down, and others who find something in themselves lead through in extraordinary circumstances. And so I think that's the other variable right now. Some probably do feel like they have been hit with a 2x4 beside, on their head, and they're trying to come through because they've not had to deal with this before. But that opportunity for leadership, becomes is always there. Now, I also think about Generation Z, right? Some of, and my kids are that, who I think are going to be interesting because they are coming into the place, many of them, with leadership development experience and training than any other generation before them. But now they are starting, many of them on the edge of the Generation Z, Generation Z. Sorry, my Canadian slipped through there. That are now, beginning their careers with adversity. So how will it shape them, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road? So I think in cases, the people I'm talking to saying, we've got to learn how to get through this because, we're in a similar position in 20 years. And there will be unforeseen events that will hit us that we need to know how to deal with.
Vince, for that future generation that you're talking about, and I know there's 1,000 things, right? What would be the 3 core beliefs that next generation needs to keep in mind as they develop, go through school, and evolve into leaders?
Well, I think generation, as they look around, my sense is the ones that I've talked to, they look at the world, the state of the world, and whether it's the economy, whether it's climate, whatever issue, big issue you look at, and there's lots of reason for them to be pessimistic, right? Having said that, you look back over time, and humanity has gone through adversity over and over and over again, and there are casualties along the way. People find a way to get through it. And what you need, similar to what I said before, I think it's adaptability, it's that inner resolve, and it's that inventiveness and creativity to look at current circumstance, think about it in a completely new, different way. And so I think those things are gonna, don't let the pessimism bring you down. We need that generation more than ever to help us lead through this. And there's a tremendous leadership opportunity for the millennials, for the Generation Z, I believe.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think, again, and I've already said this, I think there's going to be tremendous leadership opportunity that comes out of this. I think those that are at your best when we're at our worst, leap to the top. I think this is a time where promotions are actually born, that we're seeing people step up in a big way. And I think it's too early to say that we're going to be proud of a lot of things that come out of this, but I think we are. I think there's going to be a lot of proud moments that come out of the next few months.
Yeah. And to that point, I had a chat with someone who used to be on my team, younger in the career, and talking about, what he next. And, I said, well, what does your company need? Don't get boxed in by your role. Put your hand up. Maybe you need to be redeployed in another area, to help the company through this. Don't get locked into old views of careers. The worst they can say is, yeah, not now. Okay, fine. Then you put your head down and add value in your current role. But don't be afraid to think I think all leaders are looking for help, and be that brings a new perspective that can help a company, can help a team, can help a franchise, be successful. And that requires a bit of personal courage to do that, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because in our conversations, one of the biggest takeaways for me, and when we speak with a franchisor and a franchisee, and again, we're dealing with a select pool, right, of quality brands and whatnot, but people forget, it's so amazing to see at the franchisee level, that franchisee advance as a leader in the leadership principles. It amazing because we'll be in conversations with CEOs of large companies, and their franchisee has 1, 2, 3 locations, and the cross-pollination of the leadership principles, truly amazing. And you find also, you start seeing that culture creep in. We'll start speaking with the franchisee before the franchisor is on, and common themes and culture and value, you hear the same thing at the leadership level. So it's so interesting to see when franchising works, it works really well. And it's leadership driven, leadership, core values, culture driven. And it's great to see it on both ends. And when it's not working, there's a total breakdown. More than ever now in these moments, these conversations, especially the franchisor or franchisee, have had the most impact on me in truly understanding the impact of good leadership and good culture. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, and those two are, I've got a new book coming out at the end of May called Accountable Leaders, and in that work, it's really what I've always learned is that there's that intersection between leadership and culture that we're really appreciating. And what I've learned just in chatting with my clients, in the recent weeks, who have made those investments in the pre-COVID area on exactly what you're talking about there, Charles, is a leadership culture, right? Where they've got a clear sense of what's the kind of leadership need in our company, and you're seeing it play out at multiple levels, at the franchise level, at the franchisee level, and that becomes powerful. And I think the organizations that were really astute enough to be building that before all this happened are going to have such an advantage other companies that are now trying to do it now, right? And that's something that I've learned over and over again with one group I worked with in Silicon Valley years back, and the CEO was just always about the leadership culture. We top 100 leaders together, and I talk about it in a survey that we have around, do leaders come together in the face of adversity to support one another? And they rated themselves fairly highly on that. But then he interjected in the session saying, this is the thing I am going to look at. This is the only thing I care about. When we are hit with adversity, I'm going to look at the top 100 leaders in this company. And I'm going to look at, are you going to turn to each other, or are you going to turn on each other? Yeah. And I love that line, because right now, you know what's playing out? You got companies, you got franchises, people watching here where leaders are turning to each other. They're realizing we have to come together, and we come together before to get this. And that are turning on the politics, the infighting, the bickering just gets to a whole other level, right? It's a Game of Thrones on steroids, right? And it's just not helpful, right? It's just not going to be there. So, that point that you raised is so, because that's essentially the work I do with companies, because I've just seen it over and over again. When you build that leadership culture that's powerful, that's sustainable, that goes beyond the founder or the CEO or the primary leader, and it cuts across everybody in a leadership role. That's your ultimate differentiator. Employees feel it, your customers feel it, and your shareholders feel it.
So as we make this final turn, there is so much value in these conversations. Clearly, a lot for everybody that's watching to think about. But Charles, I'm going to kick it with you so that you can launch into just final thoughts or final things you want to get off your chest.
Yeah, no, Vince, I love the way you described leadership culture, and I love your point. And this is a common theme we're seeing, is that now in times of crisis where systems need to flex and bend, and we're all put under a stress test, it's those leadership cultures that are going to succeed. And there's the ones that haven't done the work beforehand. You can't make it up now. You can't use buzzwords. You just can't start writing down, here's core values. And I mean, you have to live this and be sincere with it. I love to, I love the way you talk about it and others have, because there is a transformation from that leadership culture. And then the upside is for the brands and businesses that don't have it or need to do better. This is also a wake-up call and time to hit that reset button. So I just love the way you put together leadership culture. Vince, I appreciate, I really do appreciate the time.
Well, thank you for the time. It was a great conversation, and I learned a lot as well, great perspectives. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I just wish of you and everyone that's watching all the best. And it's leaders lead. It's one of the toughest times to lead, but find a way to turn to each other. And this opportunity, a conversation with, is a great way to bring people together. So that's for, and thank you for letting me be a small part of your big plans.
Yeah, Vince, we appreciate it. I want to end with this statement that we keep on talking about two things. One, leaders can't fake it. That is clear. So if you're trying to, your staff knows. So,
Yeah.
And then just as we continue having these conversations, I mean, and I'm hearing this, like, we talk about when it's going to be over, but how about we talk about what can we do now? And that's where those fake leaders change your mindset to focus on today. And that's not just in leading your staffs. That's also in, like, know that your kids are upstairs and go spend some time with them. Know that we will never get this time back. And we talk about looking forward to this being over, but this is still our time. And if this is time in this world, then do the most with it. And I think some of the evidence that you shared is very important for leaders to get, like, even though you may have not been there before, use this time to rejigger your mindset and change the way you treat people, because we can forgive, and this is your chance to turn around. So,
yeah. At any moment, I've got this term of a leadership contract. It's come, every time you take on a leadership role, you end up for something important. And when you get confronted with the kind of challenges you got to, revisit those terms. And it starts with the decision. So anyone can make the decision to say, I want to be a better leader. You got to be clear on your obligation to serve others. It's not going to be easy. The third term, hard work, build the resilience and resolve to do it. And the final term is about community. So connect. No one has the answer. We're all figuring it out, but I know we'll get there together. So I'm very aligned with your perspective. So thank you for that and for the inspiration.
I appreciate it. So anybody watching at home who has not joined our Franchise Growth Mastermind, as Charles says, franchising stronger together. You coined it, Charles. Where credit's due. This is another conversation with. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.